Right after there's a moment, a quiet, internal shift that many people don't talk about. While the man is often caught in a storm of confusion, loss, or even anger, the woman's immediate reaction can be deceptively calm. At first glance, she might seem composed, maybe even relieved. And for a lot of men, that can be one of the most disorienting things. How quickly she seems to have let go. But that appearance is not the full story. It's a psychological response, not emotional resolution. You see, in many cases, the emotional detachment didn't start at the breakup. It started long before that. While the man is often blindsided by the ending, the woman has likely been detaching in silence for weeks or even months. She's been thinking, analyzing, and gradually withdrawing her emotional investment. So by the time the breakup happens, she's already halfway out the door internally. That's why the immediate aftermath can look like relief. It's not that she's over you. It's that she's already done much of the grieving in advance. But don't misunderstand this moment. That initial sense of freedom isn't always a sign of strength. It's often a defense mechanism. Psychologically, it's easier to lean into temporary relief than to sit with pain. It's easier to convince yourself that you made the right decision to confront the possibility that maybe you gave up too soon. And this is where the real complexity begins. Because beneath that relief is usually a hidden layer of uncertainty. What she's thinking in those first few days or weeks is shaped by the emotions she's trying to avoid. She may tell herself, I deserve peace, or he wasn't right for me, even if a part of her isn't fully convinced. This internal narrative isn't about truth. It's about self-preservation. It's an attempt to create order out of emotional chaos. She's trying to make sense of her decision by controlling the story she tells herself. Now, here's the part that most men overlooking. That initial calm is fragile. It's not built on clarity. It's built on justification. And justification is a temporary comfort, not a permanent resolution. Over time, the cracks begin to show. Memories don't fade as quickly as she expected. Certain moments come back, conversations, laughter, subtle gestures she didn't appreciate at the time. And that's when the regret can start to surface. Not all at once. Quietly, uncomfortably, persistently. This is why your response to the breakup matters more than you think. If you start chasing her, trying to fix everything, begging for answers, you validate her justification. You reinforce the belief that walking away was the right choice. But if you remain silent, if you stay grounded, focused, and emotionally composed, you disrupt the narrative. You introduce a doubt she can't easily ignore. And that's when the real reflection begins for her. She's not thinking about the breakup as a single event. She's subconsciously measuring it against the emotional footprint you left behind. Was the peace she imagined really worth it? Did she give up something rare, something meaningful, because she got too caught up in her temporary feelings? These are the questions she starts to wrestle with. Not in public, not out loud, but alone in the quiet hours of the night when there's nothing left to distract her. So don't be fooled by the calm. Don't let the appearance of indifference shake your center. That first reaction is just the beginning of her process, not the end. And your power lies in understanding this, not reacting to it. Emotional discipline isn't weakness. It's your strength. And silence, when rooted in self-respect, speaks louder than any desperate words ever could. After that initial wave of relief fades, something subtle but deeply important begins to happen in her mind. She starts searching for justification. This isn't always visible from the outside, but internally it's a very active process. The human brain is designed to protect itself from discomfort, and one of the ways it does that is by rewriting the story of the past to make the present feel more acceptable. In psychology, we call this cognitive dissonance, the mental tension that arises when your actions conflict with your deeper values or emotions. So when she ends the relationship, especially if it wasn't rooted in a clear betrayal or abuse, she needs to create mental order out of that emotional chaos. She begins scanning her memories for reasons to feel right about the breakup. She doesn't just recall the arguments you argued to, but you also laughed, supported, and built memories. So she has to selectively focus on the things that validate her choice to walk away. Maybe you weren't emotionally available enough. Maybe you didn't support her ambitions. Maybe you stopped doing the little things. Whether these reasons are true or exaggerated doesn't matter in the moment. What matters is that they feel true enough to silence her doubt. And this is where you need to understand something deeply important to ours. She's not just remembering you. She's reinterpreting you. She's filtering every moment through the lens of justification. The warmth in your voice becomes passive aggressiveness. Your confidence gets reframed as arrogance. Even your love can be rewritten as dependency. This rewriting process helps her avoid the pain of regret. It shields her from admitting that maybe she walked away from something valuable because she couldn't fully understand what she had at the time. But here's the problem: that kind of story is built on emotion, not clarity. It's reactive, not reflective. And over time, it starts to collapse under its own weight. Because eventually, when she's alone with her thoughts, when she's not surrounded by friends validating her decision or distractions keeping her emotionally numb, she'll come face to face with the raw truth. And the truth has a funny way of resurfacing when you're least prepared for it. Now, what are you doing during this time? That's the critical piece. If you're texting her, chasing her, explaining yourself, you're feeding into her version of the story. You're giving her the fuel to keep justifying her exit. She can tell herself, see, he's still needy, he hasn't changed, I made the right decision. But if you go quiet, not as a game, but as a genuine act of self-respect, something powerful happens. Her narrative starts to fall apart. There's nothing left to push against. The story she built can no longer stand on its own. That silence forces her to face her own reflection without distraction. Without reaction from you, her version of the past loses its anchor. And this opens a door, not always to reconciliation, but to realization. A deeper kind of awareness. Because sooner or later, she'll have to answer the one question that no external validation can help her avoid. Did I leave because it was truly wrong, or because I didn't know how to stay when it got hard? And you, by choosing dignity over drama, growth over reaction, you become a mirror she didn't expect. Not one that begs for her return, but one that silently shows her the man she misjudged. That's the power of not needing to explain yourself. That's what disrupts her internal narrative. And that's what gets her thinking long after she thought she moved on. Now here's where things start to shift in a way that she didn't fully anticipate. Your silence. At first, she might have expected some resistance, a reaction, maybe even a desperate attempt to get her back. That's the pattern most people follow after a breakup. The one who's left behind usually tries to fix what's broken, reach out, explain, plead. That's what she was mentally prepared for. That's what she braced herself to handle. But when that call doesn't come, when the message doesn't arrive, when there's nothing but silence, it throws her off. A human psychology is shaped by expectation. When those expectations are disrupted, the mind becomes restless. It starts seeking answers. Why isn't he calling? Does he not care? Has he already moved on? And that curiosity is powerful because it marks the beginning of a reversal, a mental shift where her attention, which was once directed inward toward justifying the breakup, now slowly turns back toward you. Not out of love, not necessarily out of longing, but out of confusion. And that's the gateway to reflection. She starts checking your social media, even if it's just for a few seconds at midnight when no one's watching. She asks mutual friends casually how you're doing, not because she wants to get back together right away, but because she needs data. She's looking for signs. Signs that you're struggling without her, that you're lost, that you're diminished in her absence. But when the opposite happens, when you remain composed, calm, and distant, It disrupts the narrative she built to feel okay with the breakup. Here's the psychological truth: silence creates a vacuum. And in that vacuum, the mind inserts meaning. She begins to project. Maybe you never really cared. Maybe you were stronger than she thought. Maybe you're already talking to someone else. The point isn't whether these things are true, it's that she's thinking them. And thinking leads to wondering. Wondering leads to doubt. Doubt opens the door to regret. And this is what you must understand: your silence is not passive. It's active. It's a signal. It says, I'm not waiting around for someone who chose to walk away. I've got things to build, places to go, a life to elevate. And that's the message that hits the hardest, not in her ego, but in her emotions. Because what you're really doing is redefining your value as without needing her validation. You are no longer available for interpretation. You've removed yourself from her emotional economy, and that creates scarcity, and scarcity creates value. Now, don't mistake this for a tactic. It's not about manipulation. It's about alignment. You're not playing silent to win her back. You're silent because you're finally choosing yourself. You're not shrinking to fit her story. You're expanding beyond it. That shift in energy, that's what she feels. Not the absence of contact, but the presence of change. It's not that you're gone. It's that you're rising. And rising doesn't always mean posting your gym selfies or pretending you're unbothered. It means evolving privately, steadily, intentionally. It means showing, not telling, that you're no longer operating from the version of yourself that depended on her approval to feel whole. And when she senses that, truly senses it, her view of you begins to change. Not because you asked her to see it, but because you gave her no other choice. As time passes and the silence continues, something begins to shift inside her. The initial relief she felt, the confidence, the certainty, starts to fade, and not overnight and not in a dramatic way, but in subtle, quiet moments that she didn't anticipate. Doubt begins to creep in. Not because of anything you said, but precisely because of what you didn't say. She expected pain from your side. She expected emotional pursuit. But what she didn't expect was your absence. And that absence becomes louder than any words, because it forces her to sit with something uncomfortably, her own decision. See, when people walk away from something, they usually need some form of external chaos to feel justified. A reaction, a meltdown, proof that the relationship was broken as they convinced themselves it was. But when you give her nothing, when your energy disappears without bitterness or drama, you give her no fuel to burn. And that's when she's left alone with the memory of who you actually were, not the distorted version she created to rationalize leaving. That's when she starts to remember the quiet moments, your consistency, your presence, your calm. The way you showed up without needing applause. The subtle ways you protected her emotionally. These things don't register when someone is emotionally overwhelmed and looking for freedom, but they echo later. They rise to the surface once the emotional dust settles and the noise fades, and they begin to challenge the story she's been telling herself. Now, doubt is a dangerous thing, because it doesn't announce itself like a regret. It sneaks in. It shows up when she's scrolling through old photos, when she hears a song, when a random scent reminds her of you. It visits late at night when everything's quiet, and it doesn't ask loud questions. It whispers, saying, what if I misjudged him? What I acted too fast? What if I left someone who was actually rare? But here's what most men get wrong. They try to interrupt that process. They reach out during this stage. They want to remind her of what they had, hoping to guide her back before it's too late. But the truth is, the moment you try to control her realization, you take away its power. Doubt is only transformational when it's organic, when it comes from her, not from you. She has to feel the full weight of her decision. She has to ask herself hard questions and sit with uncomfortable emotions. That's not something you can rush or rescue her from. Your job in that moment is to keep building, to stay grounded, not to act indifferent, but to truly be focused on something higher than the past. You're not frozen in time, waiting for her to circle back. You're moving forward, evolving, refining the man you are, not to win her back, but because you've finally understood your own worth. And that's the paradox. The more sincerely you let go, the more she starts to hold on internally. She won't always admit it. Sometimes she'll double down on the mask, but the doubt remains. It lingers in the background, forcing her to reconcile the image of who she thought you were with the man you've become in your silence. And when those two images don't match, it creates friction, and friction leads to truth. That's when the story changes, not because you asked her to see you differently, but because she can no longer deny what's right in front of her. By now, if you've stayed silent, focused, and intentional, something else begins to unfold. She starts to notice your growth. Maybe not all at once, and maybe not in ways you can measure directly, but make no mistaking, she sees it, she hears about it, she feels it. Growth, real growth, isn't loud. It's the future you want. It doesn't beg for attention. It moves quietly, but it shifts everything around it. And people, especially those who once held emotional proximity to you, are sensitive to those shifts. A woman who once knew your habits, your weaknesses, your daily patterns will pick up on the smallest signs of change. She'll notice the absence of chaos in your energy, the new discipline in your tone, the clarity in your posture. Even if you've posted nothing, said nothing, and done nothing to provoke a response, your silence has turned into a signal. And that signal says, I've evolved up psychologically. This is where things get interesting. Human beings are wired to reevaluate anything that increases in value. It's basic economics, but applied emotionally. What was once taken for granted is now recontextualized. She starts to reassess, not just who you were, but who you're becoming. And here's the twisting. It's not just about attraction. It's about perception. You're no longer the man who was left. You're becoming the man she misread. And that realization is heavy. She might not say anything at first. In fact, she might even resist it. There's ego involved, of course. Admitting she underestimated you means confronting the possibility that her decision to walk away may not have been as justified as she believed. But the truth has a way of cutting through even the strongest narratives. And the truth is, she notices your upgrade. Not just physical, but emotional, intellectual, spiritual. Maybe you've taken control of your health. Maybe you're building something, investing in yourself, surrounding yourself with better energy. Maybe your energy feels lighter, more grounded. That kind of transformation isn't just seen. It's sensed. People don't always need to be told you've changed. They can feel it. And that feeling, for her, is both intriguing and unsettling. Because what it suggests is that you didn't collapse without her. You didn't spiral. You didn't shrink. You rose. You used the breakup not as a finish line, but as a catalyst. And this forces her to confront a hard truth. Maybe she was the one standing still while you moved forward. This moment is pivotal. Not because she might start to miss you, but because you no longer need her to. You've detached your self-worth from her validation. Your growth has become self-sustaining. You're no longer doing it for her attention. You're doing it because you've finally remembered who you are. And that shift in motivation changes everything. You're no longer trying to prove anything. You're simply living in alignment with your potential. That's rare. And rare things, whether people want to admit it or not, always get noticed. So when she sees you now, she doesn't just see the man she left. She sees the man she didn't have the patience to grow with. The one she didn't fully understand, and that realization doesn't always lead to regret or apology, but it does lead to a new respect. Quiet, internal, unspoken, but real. Eventually, all the reflection, doubt, and curiosity lead her to a crossroad, a point where she must confront what she truly feels. Not just what she told herself, not what she told her friends, but what she knows deep down. And at this stage, She will arrive at one of three conclusions: regret, reflection, or return. The destination is different for everyone, but the process is remarkably similar, because by now the silence you maintained, the growth you embodied, and the absence you held with dignity have done their work. They've forced her to see you, not through the lens of emotion or ego, but through a clarity. Some women reach the point of view regret. They see the full picture, not just the moments they focused on to justify leaving, but the entire emotional landscape of the relationship, its highs, its depth, your presence. And that regret is sharp, because now they're looking at a man who has become even more valuable in his absence, a man who didn't crumble, a man who used the pain as pressure to elevate. And with that realization comes a haunting question: what if I walked away from something irreplaceable? Others arrive at reflectional, which is quieter but equally powerful. It's not necessarily filled with sorrow. It's a mature acknowledgement that perhaps the breakup was necessary. Not because you weren't worthy, but because both of you had growing to do. She may come to see you as someone who impacted her deeply, even if the timing wasn't right. And that reflection doesn't always lead to a reunion, but it does leave a lasting impression. You're not just a memory. You become a turning point in her evolution. That's a position of influence few people ever reach. And then there are moments of you return, when she reaches back out, a message, a subtle like, a shared memory sent out of nowhere. It's not always obvious, and it's not always bold. Sometimes it's cautious, masked behind casual words. But make no mistake, it's a test, a signal to see if the door is still open. And that's when your true power is revealed. Because by now, you've changed. You're no longer the same man she left behind. You've detached your identity from her opinion. You've built yourself from the inside out. So now, you get to decide, not from a place of hurt, but from a place of strength, whether she still fits into the life you're building. This is what emotional detachment really looks like. Not indifference, but sovereignty. The ability to walk away from anything or anyone that no longer aligns with your vision. It's the quiet power of self-respect. The discipline to not reopen old wounds just because they knock gently. It's not about rejecting her out of spite, but about protecting what you've built. And here's the most important part. Whether she regrets, reflects, or returns, you're already moving forward. The version of you that's been forged in silence is no longer waiting. He's evolving. He's aligning with purpose. He's shaping a life so full that her opinion, once powerful, is now just a distant echo. So when she finally sees the truth, whatever that truth may be, it's no longer about whether she wants you back. The future one, it's about whether she's earned the right to witness who you've become.